So why is it so difficult to set up this system that works for everyone who wants it in Europe? There is a general lack of transparency, general lack of consistency, and I'm not following the numbers there. And of course, this has its own reasons. The lack of consistency in approaches is one thing, but of course there is a language barrier to overcome, and we also have the very clear problem to deal with that we don't have one single standard, we don't have one single legislation governing accessibility in Europe. And this means that while a system that's working very well in one country in relation to its own legislation is not necessarily going to meet the demands in another country because the demands are different. This is a very difficult situation to deal with if you're going to stick with meeting legislation and accessibility guidelines for different countries. The guidelines there's a multitude of access guidelines, and of course there are many experts and others who've put together guidelines to help, but these guidelines are very often for the design of facilities. They're not guidelines for providing accessible information. And if we had guidelines for providing accessibility information, perhaps that would be a good step forward. This was something that formed our ideas for the service that we're going to show to you. The obvious thing is that it's very difficult to get together the data sets that you need for accessible tourism. You have to actually have people out there gathering information. It's very time consuming, labor intensive. And of course, there may be, I've said here on the slide, fragmented interests and responsibilities, that many different kinds of organizations have been collecting this information, and they don't always want to share it with anybody else. They want to keep it for themselves because, of course, they have a business to run, and they have to manage that information and make the best of it themselves. So there's not an incentive to share this information, not a very strong one, I should say. The market analysis, just to look at that briefly, done by University of Surrey, shows that we found that at least 127 million people in Europe, about 27% of the population, is in need of accessibility information when they're travelling, for the reasons that we've given before, a much wider group than just people with disabilities. And this might be worth 80 billion euros a year. And as we know, all tourists can benefit from better accessibility. We have moved towards a network approach. We're a partnership now which has these 11 organizations, and this slide shows a sort of diagrammatic form. We've got 5 bubbles around a circle. The circle in the center is the Europe for All coordinator or administrator, and we see a possibility for forming a network. This is just illustrating with 5 countries involved, and that in each network there would be a coordinator, a national coordinator, who would have the job of gathering information about accessibility from various sources and network members, and bringing that information, passing it to the Europe for All coordinator. The network, of course, is only going to work if it has a well-defined set of conditions and responsibilities for all those actors in the network, and it would also need, there's no doubt about it, it would need commercial partners to deliver value to the network, in terms of, for example, booking the facilities or providing revenue streams to support the activity. We'd also like to share with you the brand values that we want to promote with Europe for All. You can't have an organization that's providing information unless it meets certain expectations, certain principles. And from looking right across Europe at all the accessibility information schemes, we're very clear that it's important to know who is running the service. Trust of information is very important. Who is running that service? What will the information be used for? Owners of facilities are not going to give you the information about accessibility if they think that you're using it to check whether they are meeting the national legislation standards, for example. But also customers are not going to rely on your information unless they know it's been collected in a sensible and reasonable way. They need to be able to rely on that information. And that's a very important part, trust. Inclusiveness. The service has to be offered in a way that it's designed to be attractive to everybody. So we have to make our websites and our services compliant with the Web Accessibility Initiative guidelines. And another factor about inclusiveness is that with the instruments that we've got, with the technology we've got in database technologies, we think it's very important to make information personalized so that people are able to personalize their searches for information so that they're not just put into categories, but you can actually say, I would like to have information about certain items in certain places, and you will be offered only that information and not a whole host of other things. We want to emphasize that the system will look at diversity of tourism products and destinations and freedom to travel and enjoy the whole of Europe. So Europe for All, it needs to be reliable, accurate, and give detailed accessibility information. Detail is very important for people with disabilities. There's no doubt about it, and you can't avoid that. The database and the tools that we're providing here should be suitable for those countries that have no accessibility information scheme whatsoever. So you can start afresh with a new scheme and be able to communicate right across Europe using the same kind of questions, same kind of issues are being checked. But we also respect and want to integrate existing schemes' data so that these are channeled through to a single database and are made accessible to people coming from other countries. So if you have a very good accessibility information scheme in one country, it should also be accessed through this system. The requirements of many different parties have to be taken into consideration: national tourist boards, the destination management organizations, venues themselves. And a crucial thing is to have a very large number of facilities in the database. This has also been an Achilles heel of many good projects and very good systems, that it takes such a long time to get the data that by the time you've got enough information in there, well, a lot of the data is out of date anyway. And so we also have to motivate owners to provide that information. We decided that the slide itself isn't very accessible here, but I'm showing a slide with 3 boxes, levels 1, 2, and 3. We decided from all our investigations and from working with these issues, you can't provide all the information that everybody needs in one simple system. So we have to break down the system, and we proposed a 3-level system. So it's a way of looking at the accessibility information. We've proposed at in the first level, we will actually go down a road which many have rejected. And this is a bold step, but it's one that we have to do. We will make a questionnaire which will allow for self-assessment of a venue, of a hotel, of a tourist attraction, of a shop, cafe, restaurant. Self-assessment, it's a bit like waving a red flag to a bull. If you say that in a room where you've only got disabled people, this has been a big no-no. You don't do that. But we've decided that self-assessment has to be tried once more. It has to be tried because you will never get a very large, what we call critical mass of venues in your database unless we go down this road. And this is the way we've decided we should test it, by creating a self-assessment questionnaire for different types of venues, by putting this information on the web, and then getting users to give our response to it. We want them to give a response to the questions themselves. Have we chosen the right questions? And we want them to give a response to the reactions that they get when they actually visit these places and see, did the owners do their job properly? Did they give the right information?